as you can see from the title, hopefully, that I wanted to talk about two books, The Hands of the Emperor and At the Feet of the Sun. They are in the same series called Lays of the Heartfire, and they have been written by Victoria Goddard. And why I wanted to talk about these books in particular is that they're amazing and I want more people to read them. And because I think this author is self-published, I don't think they get a lot of like hype. They're definitely not like that popular. They're reasonably popular because like I looked at the Goodreads reviews and there were like almost 4,000 reviews for the books, I think. So that seems pretty high to me, but I'm definitely not like a Goodreads analytics person, so I don't know if that's a lot or very little. But why I wanted to make this video now is that I read these books the first time in 2023, and then I reread these two books this year, and now that they're more fresh in my memory, I thought I could do like a little recommendation reviews, more recommendation than review video. So, what are these books about? Why you might want to read them? I think the core thing about this, what makes these books so amazing in my opinion, is that they are about changing the world for the better. And I think for a lot of us, maybe in this current political climate, the whole world seems to be going down the drain, so to speak. So it's a really nice fantasy to have that people can make meaningful, positive change in the world and make the world a better place for other people, for themselves, for everybody, without war or that kind of thing. So Kip, who's the main character, he works kind of as a clerk at first for this emperor, and then slowly over time he gets more responsibility, more power. He's able to implement more and bigger changes in the world, and eventually he manages to pretty much dismantle the whole imperial system and instead like put in place like these more social democratic welfare models, like for example universal basic income or like reliable postal service and like public transportation, that kind of things. And I mean, it's just a really nice power fantasy. Like if you could do anything, if you had the power to change the world and you decided to change it for the better and make everybody's lives better. I just love that idea. It's really uplifting and it just gives you hope and just gives you all those good feelings inside. So I think that's a very big, like the biggest compliment I can give to these books, and why I think people should read them is that if you're feeling kind of hopeless, if you're feeling kind of pessimistic or unsure about things right now, this will maybe give you a little bit of like faith in humanity, even though it is obviously a fantasy book. It's not set in our world, but it's just lovely to have this kind of story. And about more like themes and what these books are about, besides changing the government for the better and dismantling an empire, the books are about family and community, especially obviously the books are told from Kip's point of view, so they're about how he deals with the issues of family and his community. Kip is a person of color. I think the area, like his home land or home countries, may be inspired by maybe indigenous Hawaiian people or like Pacific Islanders people, but I'm definitely not sure about this. Don't quote me on this. But that's kind of the feeling I get from them. They're small island nations in a pretty tropical area of this fantasy world, so that's where my mind goes to. And it is about Kip, who lives this his home, which is considered like a periphery of the empire. He travels to the heart of the empire to work for the emperor, to be part of the government there, and how his people at home don't appreciate what he's doing. They don't understand what he's doing. They just see it as him abandoning his own culture or leaving them. But there's also like a lot of misunderstandings and people not communicating clearly with each other. So that is part of the tension for Kip in the story. And it is also about like found family, how Kip finds his own people, his own friends, and how those relationships are just as important as your like blood relatives or people from your own community. And these books have a lot of like queer platonic themes. The main character Kip is on the ace spectrum. Obviously that word is not mentioned, asexuality is not mentioned, but how he thinks about sexuality, how he thinks about relationships very well fits in on the discussion about characters on the ace spectrum. And like there are also other characters who are more like queer coded or are interested in same-sex relationships or are bisexual or pansexual. So there's like queer themes in the books and in the characters, which is pretty nice. I like it. Then more about like what is the world like? Like I think that is an important question when it comes to talking about fantasy or like sci-fi. Like what is the setting like? It's kind of hard to answer because both the world building and the magic system are left intentionally kind of vague, and the magic system is very soft and fuzzy. It doesn't have hard rules that we are told. And because Kip, the main character, doesn't have magic himself, he's also like looking at that from the outside, so that also maybe explains why the magic system isn't very detail, like explained in great detail. But basically the idea, how I understood it from the books, is that there are like different worlds or planets that have been kind of smooshed together by magic, and it is possible to travel between these different worlds through these like crossings or portals. And the Empire was somehow able to conquer these different worlds, and they are all now part of the same empire, even though they are, from what I gather, there are different planets. I read these books on like ebook format, so I'm not sure if the physical book has a map of how these worlds connect, but I would imagine they don't, because the world building is kind of, I think, intentionally kind of vague. It's not the most important thing for telling the story that the author wanted to tell, like how nitty-gritty, like how many people live in this world, or how they're connected to each other. That's not the important part, but you need to know that there's multiple different worlds, they're connected by magic, and then there was this magical disaster that happened that kind of disrupted these connections between these worlds, and Kip and these books kind of deal with the aftermath of that. Like, how do we want to rebuild the system? Do we want to rebuild the system, or do we want to take it down, like tear it down, build something new and better in its stead? The technology level, I feel, is not like medieval fantasy. It's more like Enlightenment era. There's like newspapers, there's like almost instant communication which I think is more like kind of like sending fax messages sort of like through magical means. There's airships that work by magic. There's like a sea train, which I think is like a magical train that travels between worlds, question mark. So it's definitely not like medieval fantasy, but it's also not like modern, like urban fantasy in that sense that the world would have technology that we have in our world. And I don't think there are guns. Like, I think the warfare is at a lower technology level. But we don't really have a lot of like violent conflict in the book, so I'm not sure how, if there was a war, how it would be fought. Like, is magic used for that kind of thing? I don't know. This is what I mean. There's a lot of fuzzy parts of the world building, but I don't mean it in a bad way. Like, it really isn't essential for the plot or the books, and it's very intentionally kind of left vague in the background. And like I mentioned about the magic system, it's a soft magic system. It kind of works on a fairy tale logic. There's like these fairy crossings that you use to travel to other worlds, the portals. These crossings may appear suddenly. They may just, you accidentally walk through a forest and come out in a different world. There are gods who you can interact with. They can take human form and just have a normal conversation with you, and you might not even realize you talk to a god until like afterwards. It has like this almost dreamlike quality to the magic and the gods, like the mystical aspects of it, especially in the second book, which deals more with these magical issues. Like, the first book is more like political intrigue, dealing with real life issues, and then the second book is more like magical and more about like a magical journey or quest than the first book was. But religion is not like a major theme in the book. People don't seem to have very strong religious beliefs in this world. What are the characters like? So it's really refreshing to have all the main characters be middle-aged or even older. Like, I think most of the characters are in their 40s, 50s, or 60s in this book. And there's no main character that are like young adults, like under 30. I think almost all characters are beyond their 40s. And it's really refreshing, and I really liked it. And then the books are just from Kip's point of view. Kip is the main character, Cleofer, and so it is very like focused on his story and the issues that he deals with in it. And the issues or themes are to do with family, friends, loyalty, fealty, duty, community, like I mentioned, and then this quest he has of changing the world for the better, and it is kind of tied to his own community, his own culture, where he is a type of person who is supposed to build and strengthen the community. Like, he is the person who lights the fire and tends to the fire. Like, he gives warmth and light to his community. That is kind of where he comes from and how he kind of sees the world and his like place in it. And it's really touching, and I think it's done in a really nice way where it makes sense, like how his culture and his role in his culture reflects on his role in this different culture, but how he doesn't want to give up those ideals that he has, and how he kind of sneakily implements those into this different framework. And then it's also about Kip's kind of quest to find his epic platonic soulmate, which is called Fanoa. I'm not sure how you're supposed to pronounce them, but Fanoa in the book's like language. and that is also an important part of his journey. Like, he wants to have this one perfect match. Like, he talks about, especially in the second book, that is like the major theme. One of the major themes is finding his whānau and becoming whānau with his chosen person. And it's like two matching like seashells that you can find on the beach, like the little white ones that like just perfectly match each other, obviously. And what that means to him, what it means to the person he wants to be whānau with, and how they navigate that relationship. Then, why you might not like these books. I think the first like obvious issue is if you see like the physical books, that they're very long. I think both of them are over 700 pages, so they're like, I would put them in the epic fantasy category in that sense, that the stories are expansive and in some way you could say that they span decades, if not centuries, because there's some timey-wimey stuff going on as well. So that might be an issue. If you're looking for a quick, simple, easy to read book, this might not be it. These are not like convoluted. I don't mean that in easy to read. Like, I think they're easy to read, but there's just a lot of things, a lot of stuff happening, a lot of people, a lot of politics, that kind of stuff. So if you're not into like, you know, politics, court intrigue, that kind of stuff, this might not be for you. Also, this series is not finished, I don't think. Like, I quickly looked it up. I should have done maybe more, but with a quick look, I could not find any information about the third book. Or even if there will be a third book. I kind of assume there will be, because not everything is settled in the main story. But at the same time, the second book does in a way come to a conclusion. So it could theoretically just be these two books. So if you read them, you're not gonna like end in a cliffhanger and be left like very frustrated if there isn't a third book. But I guess it's more from my point of view. I really hope there is a third book and that we'll get it at some point. And then I think the colorblind world building might be an issue for some readers. Like, the main character is a person of color, and most of the main character or main cast of characters are people of color, but racism is not really an issue or even a concept that exists, I think. And I know there's a lot of like people have very strong opinions about this, so this is, I think, your mileage may vary kind of thing. So if this is something you feel strongly about, this might not be a book for you. Also, from just seeing a picture of the author, she does seem to be a white person, so that's also might influence your opinion if you want to read this or not, because it is, at least, I'm sorry if she's not a white person, but she looks like a white person. So it is a white woman writing about a person of color as the main character of the book, without touching on themes of racism or like that kind of stuff. Also, like, the emperor, who is like the second main character of this book, is an extremely dark-skinned black person, and like this very dark complexion is kind of like it runs in the imperial line. So in a sense, the whole empire and it's like colonialism, what's the word for it? Like expanding and conquering other worlds and nations. So the people doing the colonizing are black in this world. And I think there's like one of these 9 worlds that are like kind of tied together. One of them seems to be predominantly like sort of European white, but in these two books they don't get touched on a lot. There's a different series that the same author has written that is set in that world where the characters, from what I can remember, are like white. So there are different races, but that isn't really an issue in any way. It's more to do with like the center of the empire and then the periphery, or like being high culture, being considered to be kind of savage. Like for example, Cleofer, who is like I said, I think his culture is based on like Pacific Islander or Native Hawaiian people. He is a person of color, but he's not a black person. And then the emperor and his court, I think, are mostly black people. So the people in the center consider Cleofer to be kind of from a savage, not civilized area of the empire, and he has to deal with prejudice with that. Like his culture is considered to be less valuable or less refined or less important than what the empire's like hegemonic culture is, if that makes sense. But they're not tied to race. They're just like cultural hierarchies, if that makes any sense. So that might be something. But in my sense, obviously, I'm an extremely white person from Europe. I did not see it or feel that it was done in bad faith, or that the author was trying to be racist or, you know, make weird assumptions about people based on their skin color. But, you know, I'm not the authority on this stuff, so your mileage may vary. And then the last thing why you might not like these books is how the queer and ace relationships and representation is handled. I think this is my opinion. I don't think there is one right way to depict queer or ace or trans people. It's all personal experiences, and like no author will depict your experience perfectly in a book where you can say like, oh, this is exactly how I feel, or this is exactly how I want to be represented on the page. Like, this is the kind of queer representation I want. Or maybe there are books like that, but you know, it's a personal preference thing. And for me, I feel like Cleofer Kip, who is the main character, he's, like I said, kind of ace coded. He's not interested in, he doesn't have a sex drive like an allosexual person would have, but he has had sexual relationships. I don't know if you could say they were romantic, but they were sexual and like maybe friends with benefits, that kind of thing, with women in the past. And Cleofer is depicted in a way where he's kind of indifferent to that aspect of their relationship, but he is not like sex averse or sex repulsed. He's, I think, quite sex neutral in that sense. But then the Whanoa relationship he wants to have is with a man, and that man is an allosexual, bisexual man, I think. Obviously, we don't see it from his point of view, so this is kind of how Cleofer sees him. Like, he seems to be mostly attracted to women, but he is also later depicted showing interest in a same-sex, like, male-male relationship. And this is kind of where the representation, or like the fantasy of it all, the romantic fantasy, kind of didn't work for me, because I felt that they wanted or needed different things from each other. And at this point of the story, like the second book, they have come to like a compromise of how they are going to be together, and the compromise is more in favor of how Cleofer or Kip wants the relationship to be, and not how the other person wanted it to be. like the other person was more interested in a romantic and sexual relationship with Kip, but Kip only wanted it to be like a platonically romantic. Like, he loves this other person, wants to be with them, wants to live with them, but doesn't want to kiss or cuddle or have any kind of sexual component to their relationship. And he also seems to be okay or open to the idea, or maybe expecting that their Whanoa, their soulmate, that they will eventually have a female romantic sexual partner. So it would be kind of a queer, a poly-queer relationship altogether. And I don't know, I'm kind of nervous about how the author will resolve this relationship entanglement, and if everybody in that polycule, or whatever we want to like talk about it, what terms we want to give it, like if it will be something that everybody feels happy about, like if it's something they can establish. And yeah, like, I don't know, it's a complicated relationship, and I think it's supposed to be like, that's one of the main themes of especially the second book, is this relationship and how they navigate it and how they make it work. But currently for me, the second book, how it ended, it left me feeling kind of disappointed and sad, and like it wasn't resolved in a way that was satisfying or made sense to me. And this is, like I said, this is a very personal opinion. Like, I think there are a lot of people who see it in a much more positive light, or they really enjoyed it, or like are happy how it ended. So don't let this kind of steer you to not read these books. This is more just like personal faffling about this issue, so I just wanted to talk about it, but I'm not expecting that most people will see it the way I did. I think this might be like unpopular opinion TM about how the relationship ended up. But yeah, so this is how I wanted to talk about these books. I don't think maybe it wasn't the best idea to end in like the things you might not like about them. I think it's more important to like what you might like about them, why you should read them, why you should give it a chance. And I think those outweigh the negatives like by a landslide. Like, when I read these books in 2023, they were like my top tier, like those were the best books I read in 2023. And now that I reread them, I still think they are like so good, so good. Like when I like read them in 2023, I said like these two books are now like in my top 10 fantasy series. And I still think that, like, these are beyond excellent. Like, please, if you haven't, give these books a go. Like, give the first book a go. I think the ebook is very affordable. Like, you can buy it from the author's website or Amazon or Kobo or whatever. Like, very affordable. The print books, like the physical books, are much more expensive because I think they are like self-published or indie published. So the hardbacks will set you back a lot because it's a thick book. But please give it a go.